This is the sauce that I've been looking forward to making all year long. So join me right after this and I'm going to show you how I made it. Today, instead of using a store-bought sauce, we're going to make our very own. Frank's hot sauce is made with cayenne peppers, and wouldn't you know it, I've been growing cayenne peppers this year. I've been planning this since the beginning of the year when I bought seeds right back in December last year. I was planning this video. I got the idea when I was making my Tabasco-style hot sauce using peri peri peppers. These are the peppers I've just picked from the garden. These are cayenne peppers over here. And these over here are my ring of fires. Now, I've got some more as well. These are ones that I had in the freezer, and ring of fire as well. The reason I'm using both of these is because the ring of fire is about 3 or 4 times as hot as the cayenne peppers. I have tasted and I have tested. It really is quite a bit hotter, but it keeps a similar flavor profile. So we won't change the flavor of the sauce. We're just going to be adding a bit more heat. Now, I'm adding heat using these ring of fires, but I thought that's not enough. We need to add a little bit more heat. So I've got a couple 7-pot habaneros. I'm only going to add 2. I don't want this to blow your face off. I want my wife to be able to eat this as well. So I've got to make a sauce that she might want to eat as well. But this is going to be quite spicy. If you do want something that's going to blow your head off, then just add a few more of these, maybe some 7-pot primos, but keep the base of the recipe the same as what I'm going to be doing here. Make the majority of the peppers cayenne because they have such a lovely flavor and it's spot on for buffalo style hot sauce. So we've got our jars here, we've got our caps, and we've got our airlocks. These are my preferred airlocks. You can really see the action. You can see if there's negative pressure or positive pressure in there. And we'll be able to have a better visual of what's going on inside the bottle using these. So these bottles are clean. Everything else is clean. Make sure you keep things as clean as you can. You don't want to introduce any bad bacteria, which is going to ruin your fermentation. And yes, this is a fermentation. Frank's hot sauce is also a fermented hot sauce. And to be honest, it just gives that extra flavor that I really like in a hot sauce. And the added benefit, of course, fermenting it makes it a lot safer. It reduces the pH, increases the acidity, and it makes it more shelf stable. So the amount of sauce I'm going to be making, I'm intending on this coming out to about 3 to 5 liters of hot sauce. So it's a lot of hot sauce. But obviously I'm not going to be able to eat that all in one go. So I need that to be something that is going to last a long time on the shelf, and it's not something that's going to take up space in the fridge. So by fermenting it and by doing some of the other processes we're going to be doing, we're going to keep this nice and safe. First thing we need to do, we need to weigh this glass jar so that we can subtract that from the weight of the peppers that we're going to add into this. So let's just turn that on. So this jar weighs 1,292 grams. So I'm just going to make a note of that weight. So remember to subtract that when we add the peppers. Make sure your hands are clean. Again, don't want to introduce any bad bacteria or any nasties into this. I always recommend that you use gloves when you do this. I buy a box of these. They last ages. They're just latex gloves. Try and get ones without powder on them because you don't want to have that going into the peppers themselves. So there we go. I'm going to start with the ring of fire. And all we're doing here is we're just cutting the ends off. And we're going to throw that in. You can chop it up smaller if you want. This is all going to go in a blender anyway, so it's up to you. So that's all the ring of fire peppers. We've taken off the ends and we've cut a few of them in half. A common question I get is, can you use frozen peppers in a fermentation? I would say don't use them by themselves. You need to add some fresh in. So sort of what I've done here, at least a half-half ratio would be best. You can get away with a bit less than that. The problem is with frozen peppers, and also when you cook peppers, it kills the lactobacillus. That's the bacteria that does the fermentation. So we're just going to check how much these weigh. I want to just get an idea of the ratio that I have here. So that's 1.545. So that's with the ring of fire, it's 1545, so 1.545 kilograms. The only reason I'm doing this is just I want to keep tabs when I do make this again. If I'm happy with the sauce, then I'll keep the same ratios. But if I want it a bit hotter or maybe even a bit cooler, then I know to change the ratios. So it's good to just keep tabs of what you're doing when you're making these recipes. So let's now do the cayenne, and we'll see how much that weighs. So that's all the cayenne peppers done. Let's weigh them out. 1.872. And then we're going to add in these two beasties over here, the 7-pot habaneros. That just smells hot. So that's 842 grams in total. So it's 842 grams. I'm going to be putting it just above 2%. So we're going to put in around about 20 grams of salt. Just make sure that it doesn't have any additives in it, any preservatives. You want 100% salt. So it's just over 20 grams, 21 grams, and that'll work out just fine with our sauce. All that we're adding here is peppers and salt. That's it. No water, no liquids, nothing. So this is meant to be a mash, which means you want to blend it up as fine as you can. I don't have the best blender for this. I probably need to invest in something a bit better. But I'm just going to keep on blending it and get the pieces as small as I can get them. So the salt actually brings out a lot of the liquid of this. So when you're making sauerkraut, part of the process there is adding salt to the cabbage, and it actually draws moisture out of the cabbage quite quickly. But it's doing a similar thing here, and it'll just do it more so in time. When you are putting the sauce in the jar, try and not make a mess. You don't want this dripping all down the sides of the jar. And if you do mess, just make sure you give it a wipe before you seal it up. This actually smells really fruity. It doesn't smell as spicy as you might assume. Nothing like some of the super hot sauces I've made. It smells quite nice. So there we go. I need to give that a bit of a clean. Spilt on the edges. But that is looking fantastic. I'm just getting it off the edges as much as I can. So we then just stick the airlock in. So I'm not happy with the seal of this. I've taken the grommet out of this. I'm going to add this grommet in instead, and hopefully that'll create a better seal. That's a far better seal. And there you go, we have our buffalo sauce ready to start fermenting. So time now to go and stick this inside my fermenting fridge. We're going to stick that in here. It's been 3 days now since we put the mash into the fridge. So let's have a look and see how it's doing. That's looking good. We can see the bubbles forming. Over there we can see all the bubbles happening there. There's nothing on the top. No growth or anything, but I wouldn't expect to see that this early anyway. But we'll put that back into the fermentator and we'll come back to it in about a week's time. It's looking nice and healthy, no growth on the top. And we have little bubbles forming all over here, you can see. Perfect. Doing very nicely. We'll come back to that again in maybe another week or so. It's time to check on the fermentation. Let's see how it is doing. So have a look at that. You can see that is looking beautiful. You see all the air gaps that it's creating? That's just the fermentation happening. I'm going to go and put that back into the fermentator. I wanted to create a second batch. Now the first batch, that's going to be quite spicy. It has a couple of the 7-pot habaneros in there and a good amount of the ring of fire. But let's step it up a notch. Let's do something a little bit more interesting. So we're going to use a similar base to what we did on the first fermentation, except we're going to change up the proportions of the different peppers. And as well, we're going to be adding in not 2, but 4 of these 7-pot habaneros. I've already done the calculations here, and we're looking at the first batch. We did 70% of the peppers were cayenne and 30% of the ring of fire. Now the ring of fire, of course, are quite a bit hotter than the cayenne, so the 30% are going to add some heat. And then obviously the 7-pot habaneros, that's again going to add a lot more heat. However, in this batch, we are going to change that up a little bit. So it's 36% of these peppers will be cayenne and 64% are going to be the ring of fire. So pretty much the opposite of what we did on the first sauce. And then, like I said, we're going to be adding in an extra 2 7-pot habaneros. So there'll be 4 7-pot habaneros. Let's get this ready to be fermented. It has been just over 40 days since we started this fermentation, and it is looking so good. We still have the other extra hot fermentation going on in the fermentation fridge, and that'll be ready in about another 2 weeks or so, which is perfect because the next steps of what we're going to do here is going to take roughly a week. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you would have watched my Tabasco-style hot sauce I made last year with peri-peri peppers. You would recognize this thing over here. This is my stir plate, my homemade stir plate. I'll put a link up top just to show you how I built this. I did make a video on doing that. Let me just show you inside there. So we have a computer fan, we have a controller over here, just a PWM controller, and this is just the power brick. Last year when I did the Tabasco style peri-peri hot sauce that I made, straight away after that video, I went and ordered a Erlenmeyer flask because I wanted to do a much bigger batch. I'd been planning it since I stopped that video. I had been planning this video. This is the flask I bought. Literally, it came like a couple weeks after I finished that video. It's a 5-liter flask, and this can do a hell of a lot of hot sauce. But just in case this one here was too big, I actually got a second smaller one, which is 2 liters. This here is only 1 liter, and I'm going to be adding the same amount of vinegar as I have peppers, so we only need a 2-liter flask at this point. Don't worry, I've still got plans for this. I've cleaned this out, I've sanitized it, I have made sure that it is perfectly clean, we're not going to have any problems. The last thing I want to do is waste this fermentation. So let me put this aside for now. I want to open this up and see what it smells like. I'm happy with that. Really excited about this. So this is the milder one, and it's going to be interesting to see how it comes out. I can see that this is fermented perfectly. If we have a look in there, you can see that's just looking lovely, rich and red. So we need to pour this into the Erlenmeyer flask. Luckily, I have this, which fits absolutely perfectly. I couldn't have planned that any better. So let's pour this in. The smells in here are amazing. Okay, so I've poured the mash into here, and we can see it's taken up a bit of space, not exactly up to the 800 ml mark. We're going to now add the distilled vinegar. This is just distilled white vinegar, and we're going to add the same amount of the pepper mash. We're going to add white vinegar. I might even add a little bit more afterwards. I just need to see how this settles in. but for now, this should be enough. So one other thing we need to add before we add the vinegar is garlic powder. So for this amount of pepper mash and vinegar, we're going to need 1 tablespoon of the garlic powder. And we're going to put that on top. Because I don't want to waste anything, I'm going to just give this a bit of a shake. Don't like to waste anything. Okay, let's take this and we're going to start this process off. Now, one other thing we're going to need here is this little guy. I'm going to give it a bit of a spray with my sanitizer just to make sure it is clean before I go and stick it in, because I'm handling it with my hands. I'm just going to give this a bit of a stir around so we get the magnetic stirrer to get to the bottom. And I think it's on. Now let's plug this in and start the process up. I might end up putting a little bit more vinegar in. I just need to see what the thickness is going to be here and what I'm trying to achieve. I think another 1/4 of a jar of vinegar is what's needed here. So I'm going to add this in as well, which means we have a total of 1 1/4 vinegar to the pepper mash. So we can see how thin it looks at the top, because obviously it's still pretty much just plain vinegar. But with this process, we're going to be emulsifying the vinegar with the pepper mash, and you're going to end up with the sauce we're trying to make. One last thing we need to do before we leave this for the next few days is to cover the lid and make sure that no dirt gets inside here or anything bad. So all we do is we cover it with some plastic, we take an elastic band, and we just put it over the top. And that's it. So I'm going to leave that now for a few days, and we'll come back to this video once this is emulsified nicely. This has been mixing now for 24 hours, and you can see the changes in this already. So if we just take a look down there, I'm going to turn this off in a second, but I just wanted you to see how this is all churning up in here. So I'm just going to turn this off because it's making a hell of a noise. Another little tip, it does make a noise. Try and put it somewhere where it's not going to annoy people. My wife has already told me that it's driving her nuts. I wanted to point out something. Why I'm actually doing this, right? I mean, why not just put it in a blender and blend it up and there you go. The problem with that is the liquids will eventually separate. Even with this, the liquids will separate. You get the vinegar at the top and the sauce sort of sitting at the bottom. Tabasco does this as well. So if you leave Tabasco for a long time, it does eventually separate, but not as quickly as a sauce that you just go and put in a blender. So I've got an example. This is a sauce that I've made. So you can see there how this is separated. This is just separated to the vinegar and then the chili mash pretty much, which is down here. I made this sauce pretty much the same way I made this sauce that I'm busy mixing up now. The big difference is I am stirring this with the stir bar for a few days. This one I just put through a blender for quite a bit of time, but we can see how that has separated. Now, that's not really the end of the world because I'll just shake this up, which I'll do now. And that sauce is back to being perfectly fine. The other thing that it does is it helps bring the flavors out of the peppers into the vinegar. So when we're stirring it like this, and we're going to do it for a few days, but when we're stirring it like this, it's going to impart a lot more of the flavors from the mash that we're going to extract from this right at the end. I've let this go for a little bit longer than I expected just because life gets in the way, but this is now done. It's been going for I think about 2 weeks now. I actually was originally intending about a week. It's done now, and it's time to switch off the stir plate and let's get to bottling. Take this away. Let's get rid of the stir plate for now. It's time to get bottling. There's just a few things we need. Obviously the sauce, the sieve, spoon to help it go through, funnel for the bottles. We need a jug and the bowl. The last thing we need are the bottles. That looks incredible. Do you see how that's all emulsified? And the sauce underneath looks even better. So let me just help this through here. Oh, smells are amazing. Never get enough of it, really. I make so much sauce and, you know, I do a lot of these videos, but it never gets old. I love doing this stuff. If you have a look up here, I'm going to be putting a link to a video where I show some of the ways that I use mash or used mash. So this sort of leftover stuff down here. Here's a cool trick for you. With this mash, and particularly this mash here, the leftover from the sauce, it's going to taste amazing in other foods, and it'd be a shame to put it to waste. So what you can do with this, take an old ice tray or buy a cheap ice tray and portion this out into ice blocks, freeze it, and you got yourself pretty much chili stock cubes. It's a great way to use this, and it'll last for ages. Look at that beautiful sauce. That's the perfect texture, just what I was going for. Here are our bottles, and we're going to now just fill them up. There we go, made a bit of a mess. It's important to try and keep things as clean as you can. This year I decided to step up my game a little bit, and I got my wife to help me out. We created these little labels. These will be going onto the bottles. I don't make these sauces to sell. I make these sauces for my friends and my family, and obviously I make it on video so you guys can see how I do it and hopefully make it for yourself. It's always nice to have the little touches like this. So let's finish up the bottling. We need to get the caps on all of these. And before I put my cap on the last bottle here, we know what we need to do. We need to give this a taste. Ew, that's quite a lot. This isn't a terribly hot sauce. Well, I'm guessing. I might be surprised, but if you've had Frank's hot sauce, it's going to be probably about twice as hot as that, I would say. Or probably a little bit hotter than the extra hot Frank's hot sauce. And that's kind of what I'm aiming for, that sort of flavor profile. But I wanted a little bit hotter. Bottoms up. Wow. Oh, I love that tang. Oh. Hit you at the back of the tongue. Oh, it's really good. Really good. And the heat it's pretty damn good. So obviously I'm doing 2 of these. Sorry, mouth's watering. So obviously I'm doing 2 of these. This one here is what I call normal hot, which is why you see that on the label, normal hot. The other one is stupid hot. So I'm quite interested to see what that's like. As soon as we finish bottling here, I'm going to prepare the stupid hot version to do its emulsifying, and we'll be able to bottle it the same as this in a couple of weeks' time. There we go. We're also going to put a nice little seal cap on there, make it look pretty cool. And there we go. We have bottled our first part of this, which is the normal hot. And I think it's time to start preparing for the stupid hot. So next steps, we need to do this sauce here, which is the really hot one. This is the second batch. Before I go and put this into the flask to be emulsified with the vinegar, I'm just going to give it a bit of a test. And we're going to see what sort of pH we're looking at. This is my new pH tester. I bought a new one, a little bit more expensive than the cheaper one like this. Not because this one is not any good. This is actually a very decent pH tester, but because I'm making so many sauces, when I make my recipes, I do test all my fermentations. So the recipes I put together that you see on my channel, I test all of them and they are safe, as long as you follow the right procedures and get the fermentation to do what it needs to do. So let's test this one. So I can see that is 4.6 on the pH scale, And I'm happy with that because I didn't run this fermentation as long as I would have liked. If I went for another week, probably would be a bit lower. 4.6 from a raw fermentation like this, I'm happy with that. 4.6 and below is what you're looking for. I would have liked it to have been around the 3.9, 3.8, but I'm actually not worried about it at all because I'm adding vinegar to this, the same amount that I've got peppers. So the pH will be much lower when the sauce is actually finished. And same as we did before, we're going to be adding in garlic. Now, this is a lot stronger, the peppers. I want the garlic to come out a little bit more than maybe it did on the other one. So I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of garlic into this. It's time to finish up this hot sauce. I'm really excited about this one. I want to see what it tastes like. It's been emulsifying inside this little jar here for about 3 weeks, so quite a long time. I expected only to do it for about a week or two, but it's been going now 3 weeks and I think it's going to be absolutely perfect. So let's turn off the stir plate and finish up the rest of the steps. Oh. The smells again are just amazing. Now this one is going to be pretty spicy. The last one was a good all-rounder. It's probably about twice as hot as the Frank's hot sauce. This one here I think is probably going to be about 6 to 8 times as hot, if not more so. I'm being a bit conservative there, but I'm just going to take some from the bottom of the leftovers here. That's quite a lot, but this is my favorite kind of sauce. Buffalo style sauce, that tang, the spice. And when you combine that with chicken wings, you can't lose. Flavors are awesome. The heat, it builds. It's not instant. It's getting hotter and hotter now, but it's really good. I think I was about spot on with about 6 to 8 times as hot as Frank's. This is a very good hot sauce, and I can't wait to try it on some wings. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet already. There's going to be loads more videos like this, and I love making them. I love having you along, joining me for them, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Thank you so much, and bye-bye for now.